Welcome to everybody today. Thank you very much for coming along to this session. I'm Faith Reynolds. I am the consumer representative at the Open Banking Implementation Entity, and this is the Consumer Forum. And we meet regularly, quite often as civil society organisations to provide direct input into the design of open banking, and then more in this context where we have a wider format with a wider audience where we talk about a range of different issues related to open banking. So just welcome today. I'd just like to encourage you to put any questions you have in the chat as we go through. We like to have quite an engaging and sort of fun session, and we have some great speakers lined up who I'll introduce in a moment. So by way of background, our last session where we met in this format, we talked about vulnerability, and we had some really great engagement on how open banking can be used to help identify and help people who may find themselves in difficult circumstances. But what was evident throughout the discussion was that data alone wasn't sufficient. Open banking on its own wasn't sufficient. Helping people in vulnerable circumstances and difficult situations requires understanding, empathy, collaboration. And so this month, it felt like a really great opportunity to open up the concept of collaboration in open banking. There's plenty of it going on, as we all know. If you're involved in the ecosystem, you'll know you'll be meeting and working with lots of different people. But today, the focus is really on social change. So using open banking, how can we collaborate to realise social change? And our news headlines demonstrate just how important social change is. You'll remember when we talked about money advice that Step Change has reported a personal debt tsunami of 6 billion in this country that's been stored up in households as a result of the pandemic. There's an increase in sophisticated scams, meaning millions are being lost every year to criminals. Lockdown has had a disproportionate impact on the north and the Midlands of the country, making it 4 times harder to increase their prosperity, to bring them in line with other areas of the UK. And we know that the pandemic has exacerbated other kinds of inequalities, such as gender inequalities. And if that kind of backdrop wasn't enough, at a global scale, the UN is saying that urgent action is needed to meet climate change targets. And both the effects of COVID and climate change are felt disproportionately by people of colour and people struggling with poverty. So everyone has a role to play in how we address these local and global issues, and collaboration seems to be very much at the heart of that. And today we've got an all-star, all-female lineup telling us about their stories and how tech and open banking can be used for good, and also sort of how as women they have been working to improve diversity and inclusion in tech. So we're going to start with some introductions, and we start with Claire. I don't know, Claire, if you want to just give a bit of a wave and say hello to everybody. Claire joined Nationwide in September 2019 as responsible for Nationwide's strategy, including strategy delivery, innovation, venturing, disruptive business growth and acquisitions. She also leads the Society's response to climate change. Claire chairs the Society's Responsible Business Committee and Strategic Investment Committee. She was previously a partner and manager director at Boston Consulting Group, specialising in marketing and customer-centric strategy. So I know Claire's got a lot to talk about in terms of how open banking's working, but also some views on green economy as well, which I'm hoping we'll hear her voice on today. Maha is the Chief Payments Officer. Do you want to give a wave, Maha, at Pay.uk? And she's responsible for running the payment operations of BACS, Faster Payments, the Image Clearing Service, and other related managed services. Maha is an experienced international business leader with a strategic focus and a long-term vision. She's extensive payments knowledge across the payments chain, from systems to end user. And prior to joining Pay.uk, Maha was the head of payment supervision at the Financial Conduct Authority. She's a champion of diversity in all its forms, with a focus on inclusion and a drive to contribute towards real meaningful change. Emma's with us as well. Emma, you want to give us a wave? Emma is an experienced business leader with an extensive background in commercialising customer data. She was one of the founding team who set up I2C, a leading customer data and insights business for Sainsbury's. She led significant commercial and account management teams for the likes of Virgin and Nectar, and now she's leading the team at CoGo and heading up the UK market. She's passionate about using data for good. She's an advocate for females in fintech, and her carbon carbon footprint so far this month is 420 kilos. That's the equivalent of driving 1,042 miles in the car. As we just said, everybody should know their carbon footprint. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to share mine today. But Emma has a patient husband, 2 energetic children, and it turns out she has not missed her calling as a homeschool teacher. And I think I haven't missed mine either. Nichola, would you like to say hello? Give us a wave. Nichola is the CEO of Fintech Scotland, a strategic cluster management organisation that works across the private, public and third sectors, as well as academia, to build business success through diverse engagement and purposeful, inclusive action. And this approach has seen the development of Fintech Scotland's consumer panel, which is enabling more fintech propositions to focus on prioritised and direct consumer needs, as well as hoping to advocate fintech consumer adoption and financial inclusion. And before joining Fintech Scotland, Nichola was also part of the FCA's leadership team in the retail banking sector. So just really great to have such a wonderful panel and such wonderful female leaders among us. So really looking forward to getting started. So let's kick off. Nichola, I was going to come out to you first. One of the real challenges of big social issues is getting to grips with the data, just what's actually happening in our economy, what's not. And Fintech Scotland has been a founding partner in delivering the new Global Open Finance Centre of Excellence. So I just wondered if you could perhaps tell us a bit about that and how it's been collaborating to address the data gap.
Thanks for including me today. It's great to be involved with such an all-star panel. It's a great privilege. The Global Open Finance Centre of Excellence, as you say, is that strategic partnership and engagement where we bring business and academia together to really consider the benefits and the opportunity that open banking and open finance offers us as we consider those societal, business, people, and economic needs really as we progress. It's an independent organisation, and with that academic institution and that academic connection, it enables us to convene and to build collaboration, which is really important to help progress some of these big thematic issues that we know we need to address and understand. And we'll be able to get those insights through the access to trusted and secure, anonymised open banking and open finance data. So at its heart, Faith, this organisation plans to create a data utility to enable that type of innovation and that type of opportunity and collaboration. It will help those innovators think about future opportunities. So innovation is a huge part of the agenda here. But it also, through the research and that capability, helps us think about policy development and offering deeper insights to that policy agenda. There's a really strong cultural element of ethics, trust and governance as we think about building this institution and this opportunity. Learning and research is at its heart, and we'll also be thinking about those opportunities to progress standards and that through that consistent standard approach, really think about those opportunities more generally to allow more people to innovate and be part of this conversation, which is vital.
I have to say, having been close to the Global Open Finance Centre of Excellence, it's a really fascinating initiative, isn't it? And at the moment, in case you're online and you're thinking about how interesting this might be, there's definitely recruitment opportunities as well, as there are jobs going in this space. So I would encourage you. One of the particular areas is looking at consumer data protection. How do we create that ecosystem that actually delivers downstream for consumers? How do we make sure that data and open banking data, etc., is really working to best effect? So it's a fascinating initiative. And I think just thinking about some of the other areas and thinking also about the link between how do we deliver help where it's needed most. GovCo is going to be able to provide that real kind of sense of granular data across the UK for where do we need help most. And Claire, if I could just ask you perhaps to talk about your initiative, Open Banking for Good, and that aim to scale open banking solutions to improve financial capability. And you've just launched a new program. So I just wondered if you could tell us about that.
So Open Banking for Good was a program that we set up a couple of years years ago. And we see it as having been a real success. So it was basically an incubator where we had a collaboration model bringing in academics, charities, TPPs, different institutions to really try and understand how we could use open banking to execute sort of social purpose. So we now have some sort of thriving, I guess, graduate businesses who are actually genuinely making a difference to the lives of the financial struggling using open capabilities, and we ourselves as Nationwide are partnering with two of them, OpenWorks and Tully, to provide live services to our customers right now. So we're doing it again. We just launched an incubator with Fair by Design, which is open. And, if anyone's listening and has a brilliant idea, please do submit the, follow the link that Faith just posted and come through. So what this new incubator is looking to do is to think of ideas that can help to resolve the poverty premium. So, as we know, the poverty premium is effectively the additional cost of like basic services to people who have lower than average incomes. So they might be paying more for credit because they can't borrow from a bank. They'll go to payday lenders because they have poor credit scores, or they might pay more for utilities because they have fewer options or have to go with prepaid cards, food, insurance, many other basic services. So there are thriving startups out there tackling some of this issue, and we want to basically add to that. And clearly, as you were saying, Faith, it's a particularly timely move because of everything that's happened in the pandemic. So if I could just make a couple of points about how we're approaching that collaboration, how we're approaching the innovation. First, I want to say what we're trying to do is to really have a high extent of collaboration. So rather than having like a clear vision, a strategic vision of what we want the answer to be and sort of plowing in and sort of dictating, okay, the answer's got to be this. We're really aiming to have kind of true grounded innovation. So bring the stakeholders together, charities, academics, all different kind of companies and institutions, and who have a deep understanding of the sector and genuinely listen to what they want to say as part of, trying to get real take up from users, trying to get people to really want to do it. Secondly, we have a very commercially driven approach. So we're looking at, where's the real value for money for the consumers, and how are we going to make sure that this innovation creates payback and is financially viable from the start, because that's critical. And thirdly, it's going to take time. We're in this for the long haul. And then the market sometimes just needs time to construct new services, see how they're used, test, scale. So that's what we're trying to do. And as you know, Faith, another part of my role is looking at sustainability and green. I'm really passionate about it, and I know Emma's probably going to start to talk about it a little bit, and I'm hoping we have some good discussion about that as well, because I think there's a huge opportunity for using data in that space too.
Do you want to just talk about a little bit about what Nationwide is doing and how you think data could really help in that respect?
So look, as one of the UK's top mortgage lenders, we're thinking a lot about the fact that, 15% of the UK's carbon emissions comes from heating and lighting of residential properties. There is a massive need for us to kind of retrofit our homes to make them more energy efficient. But on many dimensions, that whole market, that end-to-end supply chain for retrofitting is broken. People don't know what to do to find a trusted provider, etc., etc. The payback sometimes isn't there. How are they going to get the money for it? And one of the key preconditions is having proper good data on what is the state of our residential estate, what are the carbon emissions, and how are we going to move forward. So we've been doing a lot of advanced modelling, but the best thing at the moment we've got is EPC data, which is very flawed. A load of properties don't even have an EPC score, or they don't have an up-to-date one. And, we're conscious there's just a mountain of data that's sort of out there, but held in different parts of the supply chain. So if you think about how much information the utility companies have, how much information the banks have, thinking about how we join some of this together to create something that is much more seamless for the consumer. It's a really important space. It is very complicated. A whole bunch of people are going to have to collaborate together to make it work, because this is a huge area where open is going to have to really help us to collaborate.
It's really interesting. It's a little bit off piece for us, but this morning I've been spending my morning looking at an open energy initiative, and that's really the inspiration of that has come from open banking. And so my involvement has been looking at how do we map open banking into another sector. So just in terms of thinking about how we collaborate, we'll be also beginning to see more cross-sector working through these networks. So, but Maha, I just wanted to bring you in. It looks like we've lost Emma for the time being, so hopefully she'll rejoin us. But Maha, just thinking about the other aspects of open banking, because obviously part of it moves beyond data, but also into payments, and so I wondered if you could perhaps sort of talk to us a bit about the collaboration that you've had with open banking from Pay.uk around confirmation of payee, and also what you think makes for a successful collaboration, especially in relation to solving more challenging societal issues.
And again, I add my voice to others. It's great to be on this panel and in the company of all of you, particularly the amazing women that are on the panel. So in terms of, collaboration is really a key word for me. I think, it's so important to be able to solve some of the issues that we're grappling with. And it's been mentioned a number of times. Another great thing that Claire mentioned is, thriving fintech startups, which again come with creative and innovative ideas to the market, and collaboration is needed to ensure that they can deliver, but also they can scale up. And scaling, that speed to scale is now one of the key things that the market is focused on. Whether it's the Khalifa report, if you've seen the Khalifa report into fintech, it talks about scaling up. But also, I'm reading a book on ecosystem. It's called Ecosystem Edge, and it talks about speed to scale as being a really important dynamic for successful, innovative ideas to make it to market. In terms of collaboration at Pay.uk, certainly, when you look at APP scams in payments, it could be devastating on people's lives. Even misdirection of payments and the inconvenience and the hassle that creates, particularly when everything is about speed. Confirmation of payee was one of those solutions, and appreciate in terms of fraud and responding to fraud and mitigating fraud. It's a multitude of solutions, but confirmation of payee was one key one, which Pay.uk partnered with Open Banking, the Open Banking implementation entity, to be able to exchange these messages in a secure environment using the secure and safe environment of APIs within the Open Banking directory. So that was a great piece of collaboration to be able to actually deliver something at pace. And at the moment we're seeing, and I think the team might be on the call and they'll correct me, but I think something like 1 million confirmation of payees every day. So, we are seeing it being taken up. We're seeing consumers actually wanting to have that comfort of confirmation of payee. And so that's one great example. I could talk about other examples in the conversation as we go. But these are all really important things for kind of delivering to the end consumer.
It marks a real step, doesn't it, in terms of reducing the scams overall, and also helping people with those, I can't remember, something to do with thumbs. And the open banking APIs have provided a real important foundation for that. And Emma, I know, great to have you back. How have these APIs from open banking really opened up opportunities for CoGo? Tell us a little bit about your initiative.
So yeah, delighted to be here. I probably, it's not an exaggeration to say open banking has transformed our position as the business CoGo. We actually started life as a charity. The business is all about making ethical living and sustainability really easy for consumers. And a lot of people have talked about collaboration. We are all about connecting consumers with businesses who share their values through their spend. And we're underpinned by collaborating with accreditation partners, leading academics, universities, people like Mike Berners-Lee, a leading carbon expert, wine service, who's an ethical nudge specialist. But where their expertise, we're able to transform it into actionable and sustained behavioural change is by linking it to the transactional spend data. So kind of to bring it to life a bit, just to explain a bit about CoGo. CoGo is an app which basically enables users to link any bank account and multiple bank accounts. You share your ethical and sustainable values, and then we show you the impact of your spend and help you change your behaviour to live a kind of more ethical and sustainable lifestyle. So kind of just to bring that to life, we have 12 core values, everything from living wage, reducing waste, to a real-time carbon footprint tracker. And we match users' spend based on a sustainability data set. And we have collaborated with over 120 different accreditation partners, people like the Living Wage, Social Enterprise, Carbon Trust. And we've brought a whole business data set together, so over 20,000 businesses. And what that means is that when a user is spending, what they can see on the app is when they hit a business that matches their value, we highlight that, which reinforces users to not only do, and shop with people or consume with businesses who really are looking to make a difference, but also encourages people to switch. one of our most kind of adopted features is a real-time carbon footprint tracker. And this is only possible due to open banking. Historically, carbon footprint trackers have been very survey-based. So people put in their details and it says how much have you flown, how much have you driven, etc. And then it gives you a carbon footprint and that's it. But what ends up happening is it's a pretty passive experience because it doesn't create sustained behavioral change. It doesn't give you any encouragement to change your behaviors or positive reinforcement. So I mentioned the experts we've worked with. What we see is that users link up their bank account, but also multiple bank accounts. So 60% of our users link more than one bank account, which is obviously unique to open banking. And then critically, what we're able to do is link ethical nudges to real-time transactional spend data. So that what happens is that when we see, for example, someone might be getting their energy bill through, we see that spend come through. And then we're able to nudge them saying, do you know what? You could actually reduce your carbon footprint by switching to a 100% renewable energy provider. And then we reinforce that by then saying, brilliant, and you've actually reduced your carbon footprint by X. And when we talk about collaboration and the power of the collective, what we see in climate change is that small actions feel very insignificant when the climate crisis is so big. But actually, the collective impact of everyone taking that step and that ethical nudge to move things forward is incredibly powerful, both on the business side, where we reinforce these behaviours, but also on the consumer side, where we show the collective power. So collaboration really underpins the ethos of what we do at CoGo.
I think this is what makes it so fascinating for me, is that, you know, open banking is a real kind of inspiration and it's a real opportunity that's just opened up so many doors, but also the fact that it's connecting people in different ways. And that's what the Open Banking for Good initiative did, and it brought kind of charities together with tech companies in quite a novel way, and actually said, how can we really deliver against consumer needs? So Claire, just sort of thinking about the evaluation of Open Banking for Good and how it's matured. What's your role on how things are progressing? And also, you know, if we think about other stakeholders, what do you think the role of regulators might be in collaborating for social change?
It's interesting. I do think regulators, you know, have a real role to play. But as I mentioned earlier, I believe this has to be as part of a wider ecosystem of collaborating, particularly where innovations are bottom up. You know, they're founded on real sort of societal problems, you know, and a deep understanding of both kind of potential solutions and also like a commercial payback and traction, you know, in terms of value from the start. So it's sort of almost the classic small scale test and learn and scale type innovation, you know, that's been the bedrock of a huge amount of kind of the most successful behavioral change enterprises. You know, despite recent growth and really in many ways, despite our efforts, you know, I think open banking probably isn't yet making a big difference to the kind of financially squeezed, excluded, the digitally excluded amongst our members, which is a shame for them because, you know, obviously as a member-owned association, like they have paid for open banking. And, you know, I want everyone, including regulators, to think about why that is and how we can be more sort of laser focused on delivering what people really need. You know, I think the future of open, you know, it needs to drive meaningful kind of innovation and value. And I think what we really should be aspiring to is a sort of almost a groundswell of new uses that really matter to all people from all walks of life, that is supported by a commercial business case that is good for everyone in the ecosystem where there's real value. And, you know, from a regulator point of view, to have a regulator that's really driven by deep customer insight, and that is very responsive to the signals of the thriving market in a sort of an agile way to really support what people need and what is getting take up in the market. So, you know, I think we have infrastructural solutions that will take a certain way, but, you know, the way that we'll get the rest of the way and the way that we will get this grounded in real services that people use is to be kind of, you know, innovation and insight first. And that is something that I think all of us should do, including the regulator.
Thank you, Claire. We're beginning to get a few questions in, so I'm just going to see if I can throw a few of these out in terms of... Emma, I'll come to you with a couple of questions around climate, but I'm just going to come straight out to Nichola actually on this question, is how can we make sure that third parties are using data for what the users have actually signed up for and no other purpose? So in short, how do we make sure that data is not abused? That's a really key issue for any open initiative, but open banking too. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question, actually. And coming back to some of the points that Claire was making, we aren't seeing the traction with open banking because the terminology open banking turns people off. it is that phrase open banking, people still haven't quite got their heads around. I mean, and by that I mean everyday consumers, what actually that means. What does that relate to? How does it relate to them? And where we're seeing innovation really build traction in that is where they are outcomes focused and very clear on what they're delivering for that citizen or for that customer. And they're coming around some of these particularly difficult problems. And we have seen some of that advanced faith actually in COVID in particular, where we are innovating and seeing innovators come around some tricky issues to help people in difficult circumstances. So income maximization is one really strong trend that we're seeing innovation against. And that's the opposite to, well, how do you maximize income, as opposed to think about how do you need more credit? And it then helps people understand that there's a potential to save as opposed to build up debt. And actually that type of insight and that type of conversation with somebody builds a better trust around using their data, because they can see the value in offering data and using and giving somebody that really personal opportunity to help them in a different way. So I think it's how we frame this for sure. But we do have to bring customers and citizens and consumers along that journey with us. We're able to do that with ease. I think people are willing to listen to this conversation. It's about putting in some practical milestones and practical deliverables to help engage that consumer group, those consumers in this conversation.
I just wanted to add a point on this also, which I'm going to bring in the conversation, the diversity inclusion angle. When we're looking at data and data processing, we're looking at the biases that we've been hearing about. It's really important to ensure that we have the right, the right people at the table, the right people, processing this information, understanding the outcomes, ensuring that there aren't unintended consequences. And the only way you do that is to ensure that those at the decision-making table are a diverse group that represents society. And I think, the case for D&I is made. I don't have to make it. It's how do we make sure that we put it in action, because we still don't see diversity at those at those key decision-making fora.
I come from a customer data analytics background. I've worked across a number of the big loyalty programs, as well as set up a business which drove a significant value to the bottom line. I think the crux of it for me, kind of playing on what was said, is the kind of value exchange. There has to be a clear value exchange for the user in terms of utility or kind of financial value. And what we've certainly seen is there is a big generational gap in terms of a younger kind of Gen Z user is much more comfortable sharing their data. And as long as they're clear on what that value exchange is, and it doesn't take away anything Maha said around ensuring that is then used responsibly. But I think critical to this open banking challenge, which we also see, is that really being clear about that overt value exchange that's going on, and then what you're actually doing with that data to drive insights, to drive value, to drive kind of financial feedback back to the end user. And I think that's a really critical component. It's not just data for data's sake.
We've got a similar question, which I'll come to Claire on, and then Emma, I want to come back on those climate questions as well. So question to Claire here from Ben Leonard at Life Moments. What lessons or views does Nationwide have in how to reframe the conversation with customers to make it about them and their life moments rather than about products? How is data being used to do this?
So look, great question, Ben. And I mean, I do, just to go back onto the kind of, use of data, I think that we have some real questions to ask ourselves as a system about how we use data going forward. So particularly things like credit scoring, and if you can sort of see a rather dystopian scenario where actually increasing sources of open data being used in things like credit decisioning could actually make the inequalities, the poverty premium, a lot of the stuff that we're fighting against could in many ways make it worse if it's not really thought through. So I think that's something that's particularly with some of kind of the kind of big technology getting into some of this space, how they are able to access, mine and use data becomes a really interesting set of questions about what we want open to be able to do, and what is acceptable to us as a society about what information we use about people, I think is a really, really interesting set of questions. to come back to Ben's question, what lessons do we have in how to reframe the conversation with customers to make it about them? I mean, and moving away from the product piece, as it happens in Nationwide at the moment, we're in the middle of a big reorganization to actually try to change the way the whole organization is structured, so that we structure the whole thing end to end based on our member needs, and kind of take away from the product silos. So I know it's a very big institution answer, Ben, that isn't always, it's kind of, people might be rolling their eyes and going, oh God, big institutions, their first step is always their first answer is always an organizational one. But I think it does make a difference, and it is making a difference in terms of our ability to kind of expose all the different parts of the organization to the kind of the front line and the members and what they're looking for. And how is data being used to do this? I think, like many scale financial institutions at the moment, we're in the middle of a journey on our data and how we're able to mine and access it. So we probably are not using member information and data as well as we could right now, and we've got a big sort of program underway to try and address that. But that's something that I know that many legacy financial institutions are sort of driving for and working on. So there's a sort of a range of capability across the business in terms of our ability to source, manipulate, and use in real-time data. And I think it is a journey that many institutions are on. But great question, and it's the right question.
So Emma, I'm just going to come to you then, and around this question about and it's interesting, really. Are there enough sustainable businesses at the moment to satisfy the demand for sustainable spending? And that's obviously at the core of your business. How do you feel we should be making more progress as a society in this respect?
So I think the short answer is no, there can be a lot more. I think what's interesting in the last year, we've seen double the volume of businesses committing to net zero, which is incredibly positive. In terms of the two parts to this question is, are there enough kind of purpose first, sustainable-led or sustainability-led businesses? There are some amazing businesses coming out. People like Karma recycling, restaurant food waste, or All Plants, kind of vegan meal solutions, Beyond Meat just tying up with McDonald's. What we're also seeing is these amazing collaborations. So, you'll have seen Allbirds tying up with Adidas, where they're taking the most sustainable shoe, working with the biggest shoe manufacturer to create these kind of big mass solutions. So what we're seeing is a growth of sustainable purpose-first businesses, a growth of collaboration, Beyond Meat just at a time at McDonald's, as I said, but also encouraging, we're seeing big businesses that have, can make enormous change, actually committing to more sustainable practices. And I think there's going to be a culmination, but that needs to be reinforced by consumers voting with their pounds. So they need to go and buy with these businesses. So I don't think there can ever be enough to solve the climate crisis. But equally, I think we're seeing some really positive movements. And this year has been challenging. The last year has been challenging, but some amazing movements that we're seeing.
Thank you, Emma. That's really helpful. So, Nichola, I just wanted to come out to you again in terms of thinking about, I was having a quick skim through the Khalifa review, and it talked about one of the prizes of fintech being inclusion and recovery. What do you see in your role at Fintech Scotland as the most pressing priorities for collaboration? Where do you think we should be focusing some of our collaboration?
Faith, I think from our experience at the moment, we're seeing collaboration in a number of different ways. So I'll start with the big and the small collaborating. So those small innovators collaborating with the large organizations such as Nationwide, and the types of experiences that Claire has already mentioned, and how we learn from each other and how we support those businesses that have new ideas, new abilities and new capabilities to address some of these broader issues. So we're seeing collaboration certainly in that space, that big and small partnership, and I expect we'll see more of that as we progress. And we're also seeing those large organizations consider how can they make it easier to work with small businesses. That's a really, really important point. And there's certainly more to do on this for sure. But what's really great is that the large incumbents are recognizing this and are willing to have those types of conversations. So there's more to do on that, but that is certainly an area that we'll see more progress on. I think as well, Faith, we'll see more collaboration across different disciplines and different sectors. So we'll certainly see more R&I in this space and more opportunity to really explore in depth some of these issues that we want to see social change progress. So the Khalifa Review talks about more R&I in fintech, and that's certainly something that we're actively thinking about at the moment in Fintech Scotland, connected a little bit to GovCo, but more broadly as well. And that's really exciting because we suddenly have some of those research capabilities and academic capabilities. And Claire's already brought some of this to life really amazingly with the stuff she talked about at Nationwide. But that type of thinking to really challenge the status quo, I think, is really exciting. And it brings that broader diversity and inclusion and fresh thinking into some of those questions of why do you do that? Why do you need to do it like that? You know, and that I think is invaluable. And then I think we'll see broader collaboration across some of these big ticket issues, and that then allows us to build more diversity of thought generally across some of these themes that we need to address. Financial inclusion being one. The Khalifa Review talks about digital identity as by way of an example as we progress some of that. We know the FCA's Women's Economic Empowerment Sprint this week is thinking about access generally and how do we address some of that. So I think fintech and collaboration will definitely see some progress on those with the right attitude for sure. Financial crime is another obvious thematic issue where we need to see more collaboration to address change. But we will only do that by, if I come back to my first point, working big and small together, fresh thinking in some of this to really drive some of those opportunities and bring diversity of thought into this opportunity really. That's key.
Thank you, Nichola. It's really important, isn't it? This kind of concept of how do we, how do we make the most of open banking as an opportunity? It's clearly spurring a lot of different sorts of initiatives in really quite different ways. It's quite stopping scams on the one hand and addressing climate change on the other, and thinking about, how do we learn from it for open energy on it? These are quite different sorts of initiatives. And yet it always comes back to these kind of concepts of collaboration, and within that, making sure that we've got diversity of voices, because we are, pioneering new ground, so to speak. And Maha, I just have to ask you, because obviously you were at the FCA's Female Economic Empowerment Conference this morning, talking on personalisation. What have we learnt there? How do we get the most out of open banking for women?
The point on collaboration was brought up at the event in terms of thinking of how parties can come together to solve societal issues. The big issues can't be solved by one party, and in fact, most industries, but certainly in financial services, certainly in payments, it's an ecosystem that everybody operating upstream may have an impact on anything that happens downstream, and so that chain is really important. In terms of women empowerment, propositions that are created by women for women, the biases that we talk about were all mentioned. And actually, economic empowerment, economic being the operative word. When we see gender pay gap, when we see, female entrepreneurs not being funded, when we see this disparity, they're the sorts of areas that we need to start to really tackle and deal with. Because again, they have long-term impact on society. It basically means that women who have always will earn less than men potentially become vulnerable later in life, in retirement and so on. We got to think of the big picture. And so all of that was discussed at, actually, it's a wonderful event. If you haven't tuned in, feel free to dial in. So all of these issues are being tackled, some big issues actually being tackled.
Somebody asked the question about data before and open banking data. And to Maha's point, I actually think that that ability to get those insights through that transactional data and to be able to now challenge some of the biases that we may already have in those systems is here. The opportunity is here and now for the taking. And I dialed into the opening event for the FCA's sprint yesterday, and Lady Hale, presented a really clear challenge to us all and to the industry, that data gives us an avenue to explore new opportunities. And what we have at the moment doesn't always work. And 9 times out of 10 for women doesn't work. So we need to use the data to find new solutions. And that's an opportunity at our feet for everyone.
Really great call to action, isn't it? And a really good kind of challenge for us all. There's another question here, and you might have some thoughts about it as an innovator in this space, and is just thinking about the balance between innovation and regulation. And there have been lots of examples where regulators actually step back and allow innovation to develop before later then having to step back in. And this is one of the kind of challenges around what happens with somebody's data. Do you think that open banking could do more to address sort of downstream what happens with people's data, or regulators could do more, or do you think that we perhaps need less, we need to be less concerned about that balance? Where does regulation spur innovation, and where should it be protecting customers, and have we got the balance right in our market?
It goes without saying is that kind of data security is the heart of what we do. And to kind of mimic what Claire said is, I used to work at Nectar. We had 90 million customers' transactional data. We could not afford to make any issues with data security. It would totally undermine what we did. And yet we drove a lot of value to customers. So data security is the heart of it. But one of the things I was going to say, which has been incredible working in an open banking environment, is we are able to be incredibly nimble. So one of the byproducts that we didn't see coming when we launched CoGo with the open banking was we were looking to create this kind of scale initiative that would help people change their behaviours and live more ethically. What's been really interesting, we've ended up working with some of the massive financial institutions who've said, oh, do you know what, that's brilliant. You've been able to do that. You proved the value through the open banking. We did a pilot recently with NatWest. We're doing a pilot with another big bank. We're working in New Zealand with Westpac. We're able to help them to kind of explore the value that they can generate from their data, and then think about how they can bring those processes into the banking environment. Because there is the reality, especially around banking data that we've all talked about, is that some people will not look outside of the banking environment because that is where their trust is. So it's just finding that combination, but I don't think it should be used to stop innovation, but being done in a secure way, which is obvious, right?
So I'm just going to begin wrapping this up because we've just got the last 4 minutes left. So I guess as we close, this week has really been looking at kind of female economic empowerment, and I just wanted to give our panelists opportunity to just make a closing statement really around how do you think we can most bring female voices into fintech, and how can we make sure we have diverse voices, so not just female voices but voices from all sorts of different people from different backgrounds. What's your one key ask, if you like, in respect of industry or regulators, and thinking about how we collaborate with diversity of voice?
Listen to understand, not to respond. So when people are coming to you with different views, knowledge talks, wisdom listens. So really think about what is being said, and think about your own views on matters. And that's really what that goes to the heart of diversity and inclusion. And the second is let's lift each other up. Let's women support women, and men are allies, and we're really kind of together bringing this voice of, as I said, the case is made. It's about action now. So what is your contribution to that?
Thank you very much, Maha. And Claire?
I think this whole listening to understand thing is really, really important. And I think the big learning, it relates to some of the conversation, Faith, that we've been having in this space around, for open banking, I don't think there should be one singular vision of how it should be that is dictated either by the regulator or by the market, or, this is a sort of symbiotic ecosystem which is founded on public trust. It has to start with the public. It has to start with the consumers. And as women, we want to be listened to, and we want to be heard, and we want to listen to people, and we have to all make the effort to understand each other. And, it's something that I'm working on. It is always so hard to plow in and say, I think the answer should be this. But, it's only by investing to listen to each other that we end up with solutions that work for women, for men, for everybody.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks. Emma, your thoughts?
I think, as well as listening, it's leading by example. I'm lucky in the fact that I work in a startup business. We last year for the Tech Talent Charter, we actually reported a negative gender pay gap, and it broke their systems because they'd never had it before. But that is the benefits. We're leading by example. We're creating the right conditions to encourage more women to come into fintech. That includes our benefits, that includes our working hours and our flexibility. But also importantly, we actually are really sensitive about the language we use in our recruitment to make sure it's very feminine and female orientated. And that's really important because a lot of women, I believe, lack confidence to go for jobs until they're 110% certain that they can go for the job. But we need to encourage these people to take a big step. So lead by example, give confidence, and think around creating the right conditions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. And Nichola.
I'm privileged to have the opportunity to go last on this and completely endorse and agree with everything that others have said already. I think the only thing left to say is think about your sphere of influence. What actually can you change? And to this point that you can't be what you can't see, and really challenge that, that opportunity to bring more diversity into a group. So if it's an all-women group, there needs to be more men in there for sure. And equally, if it's an all-male group, then there needs to be more women in there. That's just some of those small things within your sphere of influence to drive change will actually broaden your horizons perhaps, and gives us that opportunity to be more innovative and creative.
Brilliant. Thank you to our wonderful panel. A really wide-ranging and interesting discussion. Lots of questions from the audience, so thank you very much. A lot of engagement. Still lots of different things we could talk about around this. But I guess for me, my kind of key takeaways are just this sort of sense that open banking has spurred such a lot of different types of innovation, that there is a balance between how we make sure that innovation really delivers both commercially sustainable but also social good, and then thinking about actually how we collaborate to bring about that social good and the importance of diversity of voice in doing that. So I think I'll leave it there. It's we're wrapping up 1 minute past, but just to say thank you very much to our panelists. Really appreciate your input today. It's been fabulous, and thanks everybody for engaging with the questions. Take care, everybody. Bye.